You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Enemy of My Enemy. I am Hodey Johns.
I'm Lou.
And I'm Brian.
And you're here to listen to the show where we cover current events and hot topics from left, right, and center libertarian angles. Today, we got a particularly hot topic, especially if you were asking my middle school self. We're going to be talking about Britney Spears and what's going on with her conservatorship. And this is one of those things that I, as a libertarian, thought the last thing I would be talking about is Britney Spears. But it's cool to actually talk about something that's pop culture and relevant. So this is something that libertarians can absolutely capitalize on and talk about how the state sometimes manages to make things worse rather than better. So we are happy to have you join us today, and let's just get right into it. In 2008, California courts appointed Jamie Spears, father of Britney Spears, a conservatorship over Britney Spears. Defined conservatorship. A court case where a judge appoints another party to care for someone who cannot care for themselves. That's the definition. Kind of important because a lot of people are hearing it thrown around. Some people say it's the same as a guardianship, slightly different. And California is even more different. We'll get into that in a second. This conservatorship was not merely financial, but also social. It covers everything from what Spears is allowed to spend money on and how much money she does get, to if she is allowed to have children and what her public, when and where she is allowed to make public appearances. Many have been pointing out from the beginning that this conservatorship is both a bad deal and downright abusive. And though this has gone on for over a decade, it wasn't until last month before a court that Britney Spears felt she could legally speak out about it. Indeed, she said she was unaware she was even allowed to petition to end it. As many had predicted, she was not happy with the terms of the conservatorship. Jamie, the father, was granted the conservatorship after she sought help for an undisclosed mental illness. In every state except for California, this conservatorship would be confined to only dealing with mental illness. But California is unique in that a conservator gains unlimited control over the conservatee. It's part of a larger conversation. How do we help the mentally ill? Was this good intentions with poor executions? Or should this practice be abolished entirely? Lou, we'll start with you. I know you have some strong thoughts on this. You even made this our appetizer last week for talking about Britney Spears. So let's hear your in-depth thoughts on what's going on with Britney Spears right now.
So, I mean, you covered like a lot on the high level, right? But there's some of the really nitty gritty I don't think that a lot of the public know about, or if they've heard about it in passing, like they don't get it. Every person who she has interacted with personally, professionally, whatever, they are forced to sign an NDA by her father. However, lately, a handful of these people are speaking out about the abuse that they've witnessed, including other artists that she has, done songs with or done events or shows or whatever with. They're starting to speak out. And that, I think, is going to help things for her. But my concern is when you go back to the original case, she was with her ex, right? They were in the middle of a custody battle, and they had she had gone to rehab or was headed to or something. I can't remember if that was before or after. Sorry, there's a lot of details here. But her and Kevin Federline both would go out and go clubbing or partying, go to the bars, whatever, when they didn't have their children. And then, when it was the other parent's weekend or whatever. Well, the publicity really only cared about what Britney was doing. And I think that says a lot about what our society thinks of women and mothers. We're humans too. And if I have a night where my kid is with her dad and I want to go out, I'm going to go out. But society, especially with the way the paparazzi portrayed things, that's not okay, right? And so Federline took her to court, and her father supported him And she had like court-appointed monitors for her visitation, which was never overnight, and it was just a few hours. And even that court-appointed monitor like has come out and said since then, like, she's a fantastic mother. She did nothing wrong. You know, I was there because I was told to be, but honestly, I really didn't need to be. And it was, I think, one of the first visitations she had, and she was just heartbroken when it was time, you know, for the kids to go back to dad. And she just wanted a couple more minutes because she was still breastfeeding the baby. So, like, she was still nursing. And she just wanted a few minutes, and she went into the bathroom. The door wasn't even locked. And the next thing she knows, like, there's fire, medics, police, helicopters around her house while she's just sitting in the bathroom with her baby, who's asleep at this point. And a family friend, one of her friends, just opened the bathroom door and walked in and talked to her. She's like, I just wanted a few more minutes. And shortly after he walked in and everything was fine, a fireman broke down the door with an axe, and then it was chaos. And so they had her 5150'd on a 72-hour hold and got an emergency hearing and immediately began the conservatorship. And the judge waived the 5-day notice to the conservatee. Like, they didn't even tell her. She was in the hospital. She didn't know this was happening. And she was sober at the time. She was a mom who was missing her babies and probably dealing with some postpartum depression or anxiety, understandably. And when you look back at the court documents and everything, there was no evaluation presented to the judge. The judge never spoke to her, nothing. And this was never supposed to be a long-term thing. It was originally intended, well, the way it was sold to her was it was intended to just be for the period of time that she may be in a rehab facility or something like that. But then they took her to court again and like made it permanent, like a few years later. And the things that have happened to her over that period of time, you know, we all see Britney Spears made up and this and that and doing the shows. And she was given, let's see, was it like $300,000 a night for her Vegas residency is what she was making. She had an allowance from daddy for $2,000 a week. Meanwhile, all these people are making $500,000 a year salary off of her revenue. And it's all attorneys and people who work for her father. They all have to be approved by him. She's not seeing the money. Her phones are monitored. She had someone sneak her a phone one time, well, a couple of times actually, or she'd borrowed a phone and tried to get an attorney. And this is where it gets really messed up. She has been through, I want it somewhere between 3 and 5 attorneys that a couple of them actually went before a judge, and the judge was like, she's a conservatee. She doesn't have a right to an attorney. Okay. If you walked in on a crime scene and there was a man standing there holding like a bloody head and an axe covered in blood and said, I did it, he has more of a right to an attorney than Britney freaking Spears does. And their whole, you know, the entire point of a conservatorship is that she is not capable of making decisions for herself. Well, if she's capable of doing all of the rehearsals and the shows and the tours and the marketing and promotion stuff she has to do and all the events and the travel, and if she's capable of that, she is capable of deciding that she wants the IUD out of her body, that her father told her no. It's unfucking real. This is like state-sanctioned kidnapping hostage situation. And the fact that the judge this time around extended it after the first time ever being able to go public and not have the hearing closed, I don't understand it. It's so corrupt, as if California isn't bad enough. Like, And when you talk to people or you read a lot of the interviews and things from people who were around in the beginning, they're like, this was all in the works. Even her own mother said it's toxic what her father is doing to her. And how do you just make it stop? Like, she can't just say, make it stop. And part of her conservatorship is the force to work. And if she doesn't work, if she doesn't do a show, if she doesn't do this event or that event and make all these millions of dollars for daddy, then he can tell her you can't see your kids. And that's all covered under the conservatorship. It's sick. So.
Yeah. Brian, your thoughts on the Britney Spears conservatorship?
Lock her up. No, just kidding.
She is, damn it.
Right.
Well, you had free Britney, so I was going to just go the opposite side of it. As someone who's a parent of someone with mental illness, it is a very tough thing to balance their individual rights against their self-harm. And as libertarians, we like to think you are your own person and you do to yourself what you do to yourself. And that's okay. And for the vast majority of times it is. When someone has a psychotic break, when someone takes a medication, they have an adverse reaction to it, and they do behaviors that are not normal, that is a time where family and things like that usually step in. Unfortunately, in those cases, sometimes law enforcement gets involved. Sometimes that's the worst thing. A couple times it might help, but they need psychiatric help. And this gets back to a number of other issues that libertarians look at. But the things of the night where she was 5150'd, the attorneys did test or did provide evidence that she was under the influence, not of alcohol, but of amphetamines. If whatever mental illness she has, and I'm not going to try to play armchair libertarian psychologist,
Right.
But I will tell you that people are terrible self-medicators.
Yes.
Just unfortunate when it comes to especially when going through extreme stress and or psychosis. It's usually the wrong thing. The person that is feeling depressed drinks alcohol and it's a depressant. The person that's feeling manic takes an amphetamine and makes them more manic. There's a point as a parent, conservator, whoever, where you see your child behaving in a way that is not your child, as in this is not normal behavior. Like, well, she didn't pick up her towel, so obviously she's psychotic. When you couple that with children, especially very young children being involved, some choices have to be made. And I have unfortunately got personal experience in this with my own grandchildren. I won't elaborate on that, but I have seen choices that I've had to make as a grandparent to make sure my grandchildren are safe. And I'm not thrilled about it. Obviously, I'd want maybe in a perfect world for life to be different, but this is where these things have to come into play, is for the safety of the children. If at that time the children were perceived to be in legitimate danger, I think that's a good thing that where we take a little pause and say, all right, what's going on here? Now, getting to the conservatorship. Yeah, there's every bit of this that just seems like it's dirty as hell. I think a conservatorship in most places, so in petitions to be removed, I believe in most states, the conservator has to reprove their case. You have to go back through and say this person is incapable of caring for themselves for whatever reasons you want to say. Okay, at the time they were psychotic, and we can prove now that they're not med compliant. They still exhibit these behaviors. They refuse to participate in treatment. They make exceptionally poor choices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't appear to be Britney, but I will caveat this. People with mental illness sometimes are really good at hiding it. We see the psychosis and think that person's crazy, but when they're constantly performing for their entire life, which is what Britney has done, they can usually, the most psychotic are usually the best actors on the planet. There's a balance that has to be looked at here, I think, but I do think that at some point that California law needs to change. I think Britney's probably going to be a poster child for that change. Most states have realized that conservatorship is something that is a temporary function unless someone is never going to recover, that they're unable to make their own decisions anymore due to a physical and major mental impairment. That's not Britney. She's up there dancing away, and apparently every report says that she's being a very good mom now. So should it end? Absolutely. I'm not a big fan, though, of nuking all laws on conservatorship, because I can tell you as a grandparent and as a parent, there's good reason for them in some cases. So they need oversight, they need reform, but I'm going to go on the total opposite libertarian side on this. Just say there's times where we need help to just stop the person from making choices that could dramatically, change or end their lives.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. So my thoughts on the Britney Spears situation. There's so many conflicts of interests with this conservatorship, and it seems like when the law was written, you can say, how did nobody identify that this was going to be a problem? In fact, most states did, and this is why kind of California, the ACLU said that there's thousands of cases out of California that they are spending all their times on because it's downright abuse. And for whatever reason, California hasn't figured this out. There's a lot of places, of course, that abuse conservatorships, but the idea is that the conservatorship is supposed to be given for a specific reason and for, as Brian said, a limited amount of time. So if somebody's mentally ill, let's not stigmatize mental illness. This is not a chronic disease. You can be depressed, and that's a mental illness. You can, just like you get physically sick, you can be unwell and you need to be made well, and that's fine. And you seek help as you would if you got a cold. You say, I need to take something for my cold. I broke my foot. I need a cast for a little bit. This isn't one of those things. Not every mental illness is chronic, and people tend to think of mental illness, including myself. I used to think of it this way until I had to have some therapy myself. And then I figured it was, oh, okay. So now I understand that the idea behind mental illness isn't to just say, and there are some that are chronic, don't get me wrong, but for most mental illness, it's like, oh, let's get you better, just as we would get you over a cold or get you over, an illness. And if it's more serious, get you over some kind of cancer. But there are treatments to help you become cancer-free. There are treatments to help you become mentally clear, mentally healthy, alert, and aware. None of this, what I see of the conservatorship and the way it's being used to help Britney Spears. In fact, one of the things that came up in court was she said she was having panic attacks, feeling anxious, couldn't mentally do it, and she was forced to do 2 shows, even though she requested some days to actually get some help. She was actually denied therapy for her, and I don't need to say mental illness, but just denied mental health days. She was denied going to a therapist for those days because she was then forced to do these previously scheduled shows. That defies the reason the conservatorship exists. If it's supposed to make her well, then why are you then saying, no, you're trying to take days to get mentally well? You cannot do that. Other problem with this conservatorship is the sheer volume of the control of it. It is way beyond the scope of mental illness, and it doesn't really even pretend to be anything else. Jamie, her father, gets $16,000 every single month from this thing. That's just his base salary. This is the other thing that blew up in court. This doesn't include his fees, his rental. He rents an RV, which I know makes him sound poor, but it's a $2,000 a month RV, guys. So $2,000 a month RV. It doesn't include his amenities. It doesn't include his lawyer to fight her. He's actually taking money from this account that is her money to have a lawyer to fight her. Even before fighting her, he was taking money every month from this account to pay for a lawyer to just have for his own personal use. He's clearly none of this. Why would you, even if you say, hey, listen, I need a place to live, why would you need $16,000 a month to help somebody else with their mental illness? I understand maybe needing some money, like, oh, if you have a disease and like maybe once a month we have to go get a checkup for you and I have to take that day off of work. Okay, I guess $100, $200, $300, $400 a month, or $16,000 a month plus paying your rent. How does him paying his rent with this money help her mental illness? There's no pretending here. It's all fake. It's all this performance to try and eke her for more money. And it's very obvious that way. The conflict of interest with the lawyer. Britney Spears was unable to use another lawyer with her money. She had to use the family lawyer who said, no, you can't petition this. No, you can't petition this. Until finally some other lawyer's like, hey, by the way, you can petition this. Just, advice off the record. So she actually was getting advice from a lawyer that was acting in the self-interest of Jamie Spears because she wasn't allowed to get a lawyer that was on her behalf, that would represent her on her behalf. Absolutely infuriating to me. Another one that gets me is the IUD, forced birth control. Say what you will about Britney Spears. And hey, listen, I saw the court performance like everybody else did. Maybe she's not all there. Okay. Maybe she's a little out there, but I've worked in restaurants before and there are people with kids who do just fine parenting who are a lot less put together than Britney Spears is right now. I understand it's not one of those performances that makes you say, oh, this person's the most stable person in the world. Fine. But it's a better
circumstances. Would anybody be?
And it's a better public speaking performance than say what Joe Biden or Donald Trump have been delivering. Right.
On a daily.
Right. And I mean that very literally. Like, watch what people are making fun of Britney Spears from, and then watch any press conference from Donald Trump or Joe Biden recently. It's just, and they're allowed to be normal. Heck, they're allowed to be president of the United States. She's not even allowed to take care of her kids, and she's more well put together than they are. It's just one of those things that you say, okay, like, can you sterilize somebody? Can you force sterilize somebody because they have a mental illness? It is I think that's one of those libertarian, like, hard lines. Like, we got to say no. As soon as the realm of government sterilization comes about, or government even just backed, because I understand it was at Jamie's behest, but that sterilization thing comes out, you just have to say no. It's one of those that that's a line that we cannot cross. I also wanted to add that think about all this money that she's spending on Jamie Spears. Well over, we know, minimum $16,000. Like I said, that doesn't include the $20,000 RV. That doesn't include his amenities. But let's just take that $16,000 a month. Pretend now, because let's say you do need help being a parent, Miss Spears. You do need help. Okay, you are mentally unwell. Let's put that money towards her getting mentally well and helping raise her kids. How much more well do you think she would be with $16,000 a month? I think for me, it's unfathomable that we can even pretend that what's going on with Britney Spears would ever be okay. People noticed it from the get-go that it wasn't okay. It's been something people have been saying for years. And these are just laws that need to change. We can't be treating mentally ill people like this. This is one of the things that creates a stigma and just says, oh, you have a mental illness. How many people do you know who suffered from postpartum depression or regular depression or anxiety or had a panic attack or any one of these things that could be considered a mental illness? And all it takes is one instance, according to this California law. And you could theoretically have this happen in any state, but one instance and you lose your autonomy forever. You lose literally every single last cent of your finances. And the only thing you're allowed to have is what you are given from your own paycheck by somebody else. It's immoral. It's unethical. It doesn't masquerade as anything. I would love to see mental illness and mental wellness become more of a conversation that people have on a day-to-day basis, just like we talk about things like getting a cold, getting a fever, breaking your arm, and deal with all that with a lot less stigma. But this is one of those things that makes it seem like you still belong in an insane asylum for having a mental illness. Lou, you did a great breakdown. I actually didn't know a lot of that, of what the initial incident was that caused everybody to freak out. But I mean, it's a small deal that becomes a big deal, that suddenly people feel they can own your lives forever because of it. We don't want it to happen with felons. You do your time, you get out, you should be a brand new person. You should get a clean slate. That's the point of doing your time and getting out. It should be no different from mental illness. In fact, if anything, there's mental illness is victimless, and you should be allowed to get the help you need.
You gotta be kidding me. Yeah, I'm gonna stop you right there.
Hit me.
Stop you right there. I'm gonna hit the brakes here. First of all, I'm gonna correct you on one thing. We think mental illness, you get better, blah, blah, blah. I can tell you from personal experience, family, friends, mental illness is not something that you take 2 Tylenol and you feel better 3 weeks later. Okay, I've got family who's been struggling with this their entire lives. I'm not talking 10, 15 years. I'm talking 60. I'm talking about kids that I've got who are struggling with substance abuse and mental illness themselves and will for their entire lives, have been diagnosed at a very young age, and has followed the plan pretty much to the T from what the doctor told us when they were very, very young. So to think that it just goes away and that they grow out of it is honestly a bunch of horse shit. I'm sorry, Hodey. I have to say it.
I'm not trying to say you grow out of it. I'm trying to say you get help for it and you get better.
Yeah, okay. What's the first thing that happens when someone has a mental illness? When they have a significant psychosis, mental illness?
I mean, I can tell you from my own personal experience what happened, but
I can tell you from my kids' experience.
For sure.
They don't self-medicate, or they do self-medicate, or they think they're better, or they stop taking their meds, or they stop going to therapy, or they're told by their friends they don't need to go to therapy because they're better, or that the universe says, you know what, you're supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be this free spirit. Okay? Right. I'm sorry. I'm going to disagree with you on this one. That yes, for the vast majority of people who suffer from the very wide range of mental illnesses, which can be, I stubbed my toe and I'm feeling kind of down today, to, oh, by the way, I'm thinking about cutting up the family with a hatchet.
Sure.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to draw the line on some of this. There are some
absolutely.
people, yeah, but I'm going to draw the line to think that there's no instance where somebody shouldn't be able to go in and say, you know what, after what you've done, we want to relook at this. We should relook at this. But to think that there's like almost no circumstance, and as I can tell you, as someone who's adopted kids out of foster care, it's very hard for me. I mean, from the libertarian side, I'd love to say, yep, you have the right to procreate as much as you want. But for the foster parent in me, who saw how many of these kids come out damaged, destroyed by their parents' substance abuse, it's a very hard thing to sit there and just go, you know what, this is the libertarian way and it's the right thing to do. There are some people that honestly, you just sit there and go, you know what, you're going to churn out 5 more kids. There are going to be 5 more broken kids who are going to continue the cycle. We really need to have a conversation and see what we can do to change things. So I'm sorry, Hodey, and put me in the lock 'em up world, but I am just, boy, I shouldn't have done this one either.
You're right. I mean, it's personal to all of us.
Yeah. And yeah. I agree with both of you, right? I do agree. Like, there are absolutely times when like you have to like put someone in a straitjacket and go, we're going to get you help. I don't care what you say. You
know how many kids I've put in a 72-hour hold? I mean, seriously, I run out of fingers and toes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not because I can't handle it. It's because they're having a psychotic break.
Right. So. And, and I do agree with that. And I think maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Hodey, but the way I took what you said was, in her case, maybe in the height of the crisis, yes, put her in a conservatorship, but that always, eventually comes down to more of a plateau. Even if there's still mental health issues that need to be addressed, maybe the conservatorship is not what needs to continue, but getting a routine, a treatment plan, or what have you in place, instead of the conservatorship, which I think at this point, no doubt in my mind, there was probably a legitimate reason people were concerned. And I think there was a lot going on, obviously. Well, and I also wanted to come back to the amphetamine thing. Yes, she had an issue with amphetamines, but the witnesses at the time say she appeared very sober and was not
she was taking a bunch of amphetamines and breastfeeding.
Yes. No, I'm not excusing that. That's not, when she's literally just pacing with a sleeping baby in her arm, the best response isn't to bang down the fucking door with an axe.
Oh no, I agree with you.
That doesn't help anything.
It doesn't help anything, but I'm again sitting here going, when I saw that, because when you were talking, I went ahead and looked that up, and I was like, wait a minute, what if she really was high on amphetamines and breastfeeding? That's child endangerment.
Oh no, I don't disagree with that.
That's a good reason to take the kids and say, all right, come back later. So
I'm not disagreeing with that.
No,
whether she was actively high in the moment or had taken amphetamines the night before or the day before, I don't know. All the witnesses say she appeared perfectly fine with her kid, other than she was sad.
Yeah, which is
he was asleep.
Yeah,
so yeah, okay. The amphetamines in the breastfeeding, sure, but she wasn't actively breastfeeding the child at that time. I was making a point about a hormonal connection, issue with women who are breastfeeding and you take their child away. It is a physical pain we feel.
No, I get it.
That's what I was referring to.
Right. I also get that getting the baby high on doped up mother's milk is probably
well, no, I'm not excusing that.
It's a 50-50 thing.
Right. That's not great. Certainly, but that wasn't, to be honest, that had been happening and the family knew it and nobody did anything at any other time.
Well, I mean, if she's having a psychotic break at the time and she's Britney Spears and, hey, she's...
Nobody, even the court reporter that was there on site said there was no psychotic break.
Okay, that's fine.
She just walked away into the bathroom because she wanted another few minutes with her kid.
Okay. The funny thing is, Lou, I've seen that exact situation. So I wasn't there, so I won't comment. It just brings back memories. So anyhow, how do you continue?
There's a TED Talk that I highly recommend. It's called Rethinking Foster Care by Molly McGrath Tierney. And it's if you are a libertarian and you are like, man, how do we deal with the child abuse situation? Please, please, please watch this, because it is talking about how badly the state messes up something that, and she's not denying. And the reason I love this video is she's not denying, as Brian said, the problems. There's real problems, right? These parents that have these issues that she talked about have real problems. She ran, I think, the foster care for Baltimore. She had some very real experience and said her goal then was to reunite these kids with their parents and to get the parents into a clean state and to actually make things better. That needs to be the goal.
Yep.
And this is just something that's not focused. What happened to Britney Spears was something that's not focused on that goal.
Right. Yeah. Because it was private. It's private conservatorship. Privately, she probably signed off and gave up her rights to a visitation. Now, should she have had legal representation for it? Absolutely. But if she was in
she didn't.
No, I'm saying she should have.
Oh, yeah, but she didn't sign anything.
If she didn't sign anything, and this would be interesting to go through and see. But, the thing is that I don't think we have the whole story on this. I mean, I would like to see more documentation, but I don't think it's going to be provided because obviously out of privacy concerns, I don't think Britney wants her mental illness.
Oh, no, she has asked her attorney to they've made a motion to unseal everything.
Okay, and that's fine.
Spears has been the one to want it all sealed, and her attorney wants it all unsealed.
That's interesting.
And we will notice with the push for it to go unsealed, to your point, Lou, one of the things that just happened this past week is look how many people jumped ship on Jamie's side. Lawyers gone, the financial the financial organization was once out of it. They're like, nope, we wasn't aware. I mean, I don't know if they were or weren't, but they're like, we weren't aware that it was this abusive. We're out. Like, and there's a ton of people that are pulling the plug. And I guess if there's any silver lining to this, it looks like that Britney Spears is going to win thanks to the court of public opinion, as she should, because whether what she did was legal or not, or she signed for it or not, it's very clear that this is an abuse of a child now an abuse of an adult that's carrying with her through her entire life. And that finally it's now all coming to light. We don't know all the details. The indication of this last week is that the details are going to be bad kind of for everybody that's not Britney Spears, because everybody that is open the pamphlet goes, eesh, and then promptly quits on the anti-Britney side. So I don't know what it looks like. Again, that's suppositional, but there is a lot to read into there.
Yeah, and the thing is that the easiest way to fix all of this, honestly, is there's a fiduciary duty for everyone that's in a conservatorship mode. And if you are not, there are certain guidelines. Now, I don't know state of California, so I'm not going to quote what their law is on that. But if you are someone's power of attorney, you are someone's fiduciary, you have a personal responsibility to adhere to guidelines. It does not look like Jamie Spears is adhering to those guidelines. But the fastest way to settle that really quick is to put it into a double-blind trust. Double-blind trust, which basically means that Jamie Spears can say, there's money in there and it's supposed to be making money. That firm is managing another firm who doesn't know who they're managing for, and that goes ahead and has the money managed and then funneled through that firm, who then goes ahead and gets it to Britney and everybody else. The beauty about that is there's no communication with that firm. It's actually purposely written. If there's any type of reach out that's blocked, it's basically that the contract between the money is between these two. And what ends up happening is that it keeps it on the up and up. That company has to report financials. The middle company has to report financials, and you have to report financials. If all three match, everything's on the up and up, as long as they're all adhering to their fiduciary duty.
Right. And I think part of that would be great.
Well, it should be. No, it's ridiculous that with that much wealth and things like that it doesn't happen. I mean, honestly, here's what happens with Social Security. Social Security is probably more responsible when you're on disability than anything else, because you've got to prove receipts of what you're spending your money on. I went to the grocery store and I bought $83 worth of groceries. Well, was it really $83? Was it really all groceries? They'll go through that crap. They'll audit you on that and make sure you're spending time. Why aren't we expecting the same out of this? And as a parent, I can tell you the first thing that I would want done is I don't want to be responsible if my daughter suddenly became a multimillionaire. I don't want to be responsible for money other than being an advisor to say, make sure that's being invested wisely and not foolishly hidden away. But that's also why you do other things.
That's because you're a good dad.
Here's the funny thing that we think that money just sits there and and then the bank just shoves you a check every month, and there's actual work involved. And I know we like to say, oh, it's not really work. You're just sitting there. If you're managing a portfolio like that, it really does have a work component to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Is it the same as digging a ditch for 8 hours a day? No, but then again, I'm sitting behind a computer 8 hours a day. So,
it's a different kind of exhausting.
Yeah, it's mentally exhausting, especially if your client is saying, I expect 7% returns every year, and you're going, oh, we're in a down year. Okay, let me go jump out the window. So, there's a lot of things that could be done. And if Jamie Spears was smart, he would go and say, yeah, you know what? I'm out of her finances. Here's the third party that's handling it.
We'll never see that because it's all about the money for him. And we've seen that since she was like 12 years old. Like he's put himself in a position to be pushing her and grooming her for fame and
I know.
making all this money, and we've
It's
all watched this
ridiculous.
play out publicly for a bazillion years, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And
And-
smart. Oh, go ahead, Lou. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and to add kind of a little more detail to what Hodey was saying earlier about, he gets $16,000 a month or whatever. But those attorneys, when she was in the hospital, he over 4 months' time, he spent $900,000 for crisis PR attorneys.
Yeah, it's
to spin a bunch of stories to make her look great in the media. Meanwhile, she's actually in the hospital and home, and then being forced to rehearse 18 hours a day. So he's literally making millions of dollars by enslaving her. That's where this makes me sick. And she even said, yes, I want to go to therapy. Yes, I want to have a counselor. Yes, I know I need to stay on XYZ medications. And I want to do that. But I need him the hell out of my finances. She's like, he works for me. How is this right?
Yeah. And the amazing thing to do with this, again, just these are all smart people. It's not that hard to set up. You can set it up if you have 20,000. You can go to any bank or any financial advisor and say, I want to set up a double blind trust. They'll look at and be like, okay.
But that's not what he wants.
They'll be like going, okay, we get your money. We take a small little bit of it and we hand it to you every month,
Right. But
to
that's
handle the processing.
not what he wants. He controls every detail of every penny, every hour of her itinerary.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. And it is.
It's
and that
terrifying that's happening in 2021.
Right. And it's happening only in one state. The most brilliant liberal state in the union, the smartest, brightest, most beautiful people of California have fucked up big time. So once again,
the trouble is
what you get for relying on daddy government.
You're mentioning that there's a lot of smart people involved, Brian. The issue is there's not a lot of good people involved.
Well,
right, that's the problem.
And when you have a bureaucrat and an abusive parent and they get together, they're bound to make a deal that is not good for the innocent, good person. And that's kind of the issue that I have. And I apologize. Maybe it's just speaking out of my own personal experience because I was a self-admitted case and, that kind of thing. And I understand that maybe that's rare for some people or for your experience or whatever it may be. And I don't mean to speak out of ignorance to that, but I do think that there is a point where you say, I think for me, I imagine that what if I was treated this way because I self-admitted? Yeah. And that's what the lens with which I see it, or even if I didn't self-admit, to just say you made a mistake. We don't if you graffiti the side of a building, I don't keep you in jail until, for 50 years, unless I'm a politician, because that's not the point. I want to rehab you, teach you about property, get you on your way. I'm not trying to demean what mental illness is, because I understand that for some people, and I tried to communicate this, but I'll just try to communicate it better, that for some cases it is chronic. For some cases it is the equivalent of cancer, just like when we talk about physical diseases. Yeah, maybe today you've got a cold, maybe tomorrow you've got cancer, right? Like maybe you've broken a leg. These are all different things that require different types of rehabilitation and medications and surgeries and whatever it may be, and different kinds of treatments. And I think that that's one of the great parts about going into this generation where we're learning more and more about mental health and mental wellness, is that we now understand it's like, hey, it's not just cheer up, buddy, for every problem that you have, right? It's not that depression is the only mental illness, it's why am I not miscommunication sometimes can be a huge sign that there's a mental illness there, that I say, I hear I love you, but I don't feel I love you. What's going on? And so we need to understand these things. And I think when I see these problems, I say, okay, what's the solution here? Now, of course, government botched it. I expect them to botch it. We do have parents that botch it. And so it's hard because I think the challenge, Lou, for people in our position is that it's hard for people to imagine a voluntary society taking care of this kind of situation, because ultimately you can say, no, I'm going to voluntarily keep doing meth and I'm going to voluntarily keep breastfeeding my kid. And it's not voluntary for the child, I guess, but so everybody else, how do you get involved on behalf of the kids involuntary? What's happening to the kid involuntarily? Kid taking crystal meth. How do you get involved there without some kind of law?
And I am the first one to say I would love to see a society where mental illness and things like that, where people feel free to come up and talk about it. The problem is that as someone who's dealt with the foster care system, the mental health system for the past 30 years, it's not getting better. It's getting worse. We're getting far better at saying we're mentally ill, and we're getting far more, how do I want to say this in the gentlest way possible, accepting of destructive behavior. To a point, I watched when we were looking at a facility for I watched a worker have a kid walk around with a crayon, was walking around writing on the walls, walking around and destroying, not destroying it, but just as your graffiti thing. Sure. There.
Yeah.
Kid's probably about 9. Just let him do it. Let him do it. Were there any consequences? No. Were they doing anything about it? No. What is that doing? The kid's not having a psychotic break. Kid's just calmly walking around, destroying the wall. Somebody's going to have to clean up. And they were like, well, we're not going to stop him. I'm like, well, what's going to happen when he gets out of here? What's going to happen?
He's going to color on a building that they don't let him get away with it.
Right. They're not going. Yeah. He's going to color on your house. He's going to color on somebody else's house. He's going to do that because that behavior at 9 was fine. Why isn't it acceptable when I'm 13? Why isn't it acceptable when I'm 19? So
Brian wants people coming out of the wombs in suits and ties. Everybody.
I want people coming out, and there are some things that you also have to understand. Told you there are other psychoses, personality disorders.
Sure.
That no amount of medication will touch.
Yeah.
And we've all met somebody like that.
And to be clear, I didn't medicate for mine either. Just people are wondering. I changed my lifestyle, but
no, and that's fine. And that's Hodey, I applaud you for doing that. I will not at all mock that. I'm talking about the real psychos. I'm talking about the ones that can play it up real nicely and are just secretly what best word described as evil. Because some people just want to watch the world burn. So Britney is probably not one of them. I don't see her as the maniacal, first my children, then the world. I do see her in an abusive situation. I also think that Brooke Shields' mom is probably the brightest woman on the planet for getting her teenage daughter out of that shit. I remember when that happened, and I was like, what's she getting out? She's going to be rich. Oh, yeah. Now you see.
Well, let me propose each of you a question then.
Yeah.
Start with Lou, and different questions. So, Lou, your question, how does a voluntary society deal with it? Brian, how does an involuntary society deal with it better? So, Lou, let's start with you. How does a voluntary society deal with what's going on with Britney Spears? Or maybe if we turn up the heat a little bit, what's going on with somebody is what Brian described, some kind of psychopath.
I mean, I think it really comes down to, keeping it local, whatever the equivalent is in that situation. I mean, do we have a Ted Bundy running around South Bend? Then, and we're going to, even in a voluntary society, right, where there is no government per se, there's still going to be people out there who have a doctorate in forensics and maybe run a business that will investigate things for, donations, right? So I guarantee you that would be a thing. I would do it because that sounds like fun.
Become a casa. You'll do it and you won't get paid for it. It'll be awesome. Trust me.
Right. It's just one of those things that in a voluntary society, you oftentimes will have similar roles for people who, are investigators, forensic scientists, things like that. We just don't have the jackass cops that kick in your door at 2 a.m. and shoot you just in case. Like, that's really where that comes from. And in some cases, it's dealt with in the family, In other cases, you may rely on a church or a volunteer organization of therapists or, whatever. I don't know that. That's pretty much it. It's oftentimes handled the same way, but it really comes down to what makes sense. And I think as a society, like, if your kid's being a jerk, like, take the paint cans from him. If your kid's gonna murder someone, lock him in his bedroom till he calms down. Like, or whatever the solution is. I'm not saying that. That was a joke, by the way. Like, if
you go to your room until you want him to stop murdering Killy, okay?
Right? No, I was being seriously sarcastic. But like, the obvious things are still going to happen, right? But you're going to also have things where parents can talk to doctors more freely. In some cases, and doctors can more freely say, no, I'm not going to talk to you about this. Instead of all these weird bureaucratic ins and outs, right?
Okay, so Brian, how do we? And I know I painted you in a bad light on purpose when I said involuntary society.
No, I'm good with it. I have an answer.
How does this work where we have a government? How do we kind of make it so that they actually do the right thing? That's always the trick.
Okay, I have 2 words for it. Very poorly. Okay, because that's what we have right now. If you deal with any of the major mental health programs, facilities, things like that, you're going to find that they look strikingly familiar to the DMV, DCFs, all these other agencies. Don't get me wrong, there are very good doctors out there. They're usually in private practice. But if you're dealing with the big organizations, here in Indiana, we have the Bowen Center, who, by the way, there are some fabulous people there. Do not get me wrong. And I can give you some great recommendations of therapists and doctors that are there, especially one that I've been working with for 20 years. But that being said, a lot of these people are checking a box. Not only the people going in there for their required therapy, but the people behind the clipboard. They're all checking boxes. So there are people there that genuinely want to help. There are people that it's one of these things that you can very easily get the worst possible person handling your medication and therapy. It's also possible you can get the best possible person. It's literally a roll of the dice. And with long-term mental illness, you have to be willing and able to get up and say, I don't think this is working, or I don't think it's working the way it should, and I want to try something different. That is harder to do than you think. The other thing is it's insanely expensive. These people that are there for counseling, if you have to go to counseling twice a week, you're paying that person to be the counselor probably close to $40-50 an hour, with salary, benefits, everything else. That gets really expensive really quick, and most insurance only covers very short-term stuff. So this is probably the most illibertarian thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to lose my righty cred here. Social, mental illness is one of those things that I sit there and go, boy, it's awfully expensive and no one can afford it. And it's really kind of a national need. So it's almost like there's got to be a way to do this. I like Lou's idea of a community, but I will tell you, I've had a lot of neighbors in my lifetime. Some of them have been really cool, but I can count maybe about, on one hand and have fingers left over where I would feel comfortable talking to them and saying, hey, we have problems or things like that. It's very tough, especially if you're a foster parent. But I will tell you, there's just a lot of people out there that will check a box and also will conveniently throw you out of their program if you no longer get the qualification from the state because, I don't know, your child isn't special needs. The child you're trying to adopt isn't special needs and is only regular adoption, and they go and cancel your license 3 days before that you have to go through and restart everything and almost screw up the adoption. That happened to us, and that agency can burn forever.
That's awful.
Yeah. I still have the letter.
Wow, that is infuriating.
Oh yeah. Luckily we honestly had, I often crack on DCS for being terrible. We had honestly the nicest caseworker I've ever worked with down in Indianapolis. And I mean, over the years, she's kept up with us because we adopted our son when he was very young. And it's like one of those shining stars. But again, you have to get lucky. We got lucky. We could have very well had a terrible caseworker goes, that's a lot of work. She has her license redone, and we got an extension for us so that we could get our state license so we can keep the adoption moving forward.
So everything worked out in the end?
Oh yeah. No, my son's it's all good. I just, that agency can burn in you know where. Yeah, trust me. Every time I see that caseworker, because she lives in my town, hi.
Sounds like she will burn in hell.
She doesn't think she will. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, well, she go. This is one of those. It's complex. I think that the problem is that it's one of those. It's tough to say two wrongs don't make a right. But when we have somebody having an involuntary interaction with a child that can't consent to methamphetamine, or a child that can't consent to whatever's being done to them, you do have a moral obligation to intervene, right? To stop that. If we talk about voluntarism, that doesn't mean letting people do what they want to their kid.
Right.
It needs to be voluntary for the kids as well. Kids can't consent. That's why you can't have sex with them. Kids can't consent to doing drugs. That's why you can't.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can't consent
enough
to having
drugs till they consent. Yeah. No.
Right. And so that's why in this voluntary society that we talk about, there are still times when it's ethical to intervene. Yes, it's involuntary for the one person, but they've broken if it's a voluntary society, they're involved in an involuntary behavior. Right. And so you need to say, I'm sorry. Okay. Removing your kid. All right. Mm-hmm. Might sound like government. I don't think it needs to. Again, I very strongly recommend the Molly McGrath-Tierney TEDx talk. Just a fantastic example of what her practices were of saying, hey, as a program, we're the government. We're no longer going to take kids anymore. Here's what we're going to do. And she has the most incredible success stories to talk about. It's really, it touched me because this is one of those subjects for me I didn't know. I was kind of confused on. I was scared of, and I think it's one of those one of those talks that touched me because I just said, oh, okay, this is not only is it how it could work in a libertarian society, but it's substantially better. Right. And I'm not saying that everybody, again, I don't demand anarchy from everybody. She worked for the government. She just happened to do it in a very libertarian way. Right. And so I understand that this is also, she still had some kind of badge of authority. And so it led some credence to the filthy minarchists like Brian over there. Like maybe you'd say this is something we have government do. But ultimately what this needs to come down to is addressing the mental illness. It absolutely has to do that. The problem with this conservatorship is by definition, the reason you grant that is to help somebody take care of themselves. And the problem, this person used it to take care, not of the individual involved, but used it to take care of himself. The state has collected money on this and used it to take care of themselves. Who has not been taken care of? By definition, this isn't even really conservatorship. Because you're supposed to take care of the person who can't take care of themselves, and you've done the opposite. You've thrown them to the dogs, you've denied them therapy, and you've significantly hurt them. Jamie Spears, wherever you are, you also join Brian's
former social worker,
burning in hell, as I'm sure you will. Get this. I hope hell is hot for this reason. Yeah. Get the marshmallows, right? It is one of those that I think we should all be compassionate to people, to be understanding. There's a way to be a non-Karen and still be a very caring neighbor. And I think that we should focus on how to do those things. There are also ways to do this yourself. Even if you don't have the guise of government, to just say, like, if you know somebody who is on, I'm just going to be level here. I hate to out myself like this, but I know people who drank while pregnant, got high while pregnant, and then after they gave birth, still got high, still drank, still did terrible things, still bad predicament for the kid to be around. And I still don't want to call government on them because I know what that looks like and they don't get better and it ends up really ugly. But there is a way to intervene in their life socially that doesn't involve authority, that is more effective, to say, hey, listen, let's talk about these things. Let's give you an alternative lifestyle. Let's have you start doing some of these things. And Brian is correct. They are going to resist. It's not always, well, I shouldn't say, I want to take everybody's, I'm spanning the gamut of mental illness here, right?
Which is difficult.
It's different. For some people, they'll be very receptive to it, right? Yeah. Like I, as soon as I realized it, immediately admitted myself. Like the day I started feeling that way, I actually got help for it in the same day. Some people fight it and resist it.
Right. That's extremely rare.
And I don't, and the thing, so maybe that's how it is and people resist it. But ultimately the idea is we do want to get these people better. We do want to get them cleaned up. And whether you believe in government or not, I think this is a good last word on the subject, that whatever plan you have needs to be a plan that is for the health of everybody. The mom, the child, the dad. We almost barely discussed K-Fed and all this. I'm sorry, because he should have been. But we need to discuss the health of these families.
Kind of a douche.
And as soon as we stop discussing the health of these families, we've lost focus. And that focus just needs to be there. If your solution is a government solution, you 100% need to be accountable for that solution and make sure that solution is accountable to the people involved in it. And if your solution is voluntary, you need to be a very active neighbor and a very active participant in your community. Either way, if you don't do one of those on either side, you're a hypocrite.
Yeah, just what I want is a bunch of Karens going around asking how I'm feeling today.
How do you feel about that? No,
how you doing? Come out.
You kind of make me depressed when you say the mental wellness solutions aren't getting better, Brian. Because I think for me, the amount of materials I had I felt like it was so much better. Maybe the culture around it's not there yet.
The culture is actually further ahead than the system.
Yes.
Right? Because we've normalized on social media, there's entire campaigns about normalizing mental illness in the sense that, there's less stigma. And so people are more comfortable reaching out to the system, unfortunately. And on that note of voluntary, mental health issues, right? And not volunteering to have a mental health issue, but you know what I mean. Okay. There already are tons of options out there. For a while there, I worked with a small town local United Way that had a completely volunteer program of doctors, counselors, therapists who would volunteer X amount of time a week and do free services for the community. And they however often they would run some sort of charity event for donations and, for supplies, anything they needed, for food, there was constantly something to help these people. And not only that, a lot of times those therapists would get better results if they spoke to someone one-on-one, say, I think it would be a wise idea for you to go to the hospital voluntarily, right? But when you're dragged to the hospital, you want to check yourself out. Like the numbers, like we did a whole news story on it. I'd love to find that someday because that was several years ago. But these volunteer psychiatrists and therapists and stuff had a bigger impact on people getting better help. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks for itself. And a lot of these things exist now. So you call yourself a voluntarist, go, even if you don't need it, right? Go get cards and pamphlets and the information, because that's one of the things that is a struggle, because they're voluntary organizations. They don't advertise. So a lot of people don't know it's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So go find it. Go tell people about it. Post about it.
Be part of the solution. I like
Exactly.
it. Cool. Well, everybody, we are going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back to give you a piece of our minds. All right, everybody. Thanks for holding on through the break. So, piece of my mind segment, we're going to talk about whatever we feel like. And in this one, there was so much negative news last week that I kind of wanted to talk about the Biden with the Building Back America Better plan or whatever it was, with the 4 years of mandated additional schooling and double pre-K and then through 14th grade. Just absolute, it's low-hanging fruit, okay? But here's the thing. If I don't say this, I'll never say anything good about Joe Biden or Donald Trump. This is complimenting both our presidents. I know. And if I don't say this, it might never happen ever again.
I'm all ears. Go for it.
We have effectively left combat operations in Afghanistan. This was organized. Yes. This was organized by Donald Trump, believe it or not, who scheduled it to happen in the spring. Joe Biden postponed it. He said he was going to postpone it for the fall, but he has actually managed to leave effective combat operations in July. Now, does this come with a lot of stipulations? Of course, we can still drone strike the country. Yes, we can. Things have already gotten a little bit more violent since we left. That has also happened. Okay. Here's the issue. This was an engagement that took the lives of, we don't have an estimate because we suck. But and it depends on which organization you ask, but on the low end, we probably killed around 200,000 innocent people. And on the high end, you're looking at well over 500,000 innocent people. And that's, and I need to specify, that's innocent people. Mm-hmm. That is not combatants. That is not insurgents. That is not Afghanistan. That is not, not Afghanistan. They're not our enemies. This is not the Taliban. This is not Al-Qaeda. This is not any of those terrorist cells or Hamas that you hear about. This is innocent people.
Women,
putting an end to that. Women and children. Putting an end to, in fact, almost exclusively women and children, because we had pretty much been telling every male that we killed as a combatant. That is not a joke. For those who wish to see more numbers on this, here's the thing. Our last 3 administrations, which Joe Biden was a part of and Donald Trump was a part of, okay? Our last 3 administrations have been lying through their teeth about it with the leak of the Afghanistan papers. Here's another one I don't compliment very often. We have this, it wasn't a leak, but the Washington Post filed for this information under the Freedom of Information Act, which is how we know that the military commanders for years said, you'll never leave. We're becoming more and more unpopular. Al-Qaeda is stronger than ever before here. The Taliban is stronger than ever here. We are actually making them more popular. And by being in this country, they are actually gaining more and more support. They are gaining more money. We are actually losing this war. They said it over and over. That was revealed on top of the fact that we have been hiding civilian casualties and disguising them as combatant casualties. It's finally somewhat over. And I get that comes with stipulations. I really do. And I don't want to paint this out with the rosiest colored glasses. But the idea that we are no longer going to kill hundreds of thousands of people there every couple of years is a big deal. And it's very important. And it's a very big start for how healing happens in the Middle East. I need to tell this story because here's the thing. People might say, well, no, duh. But the problem is that after we withdrew combat operations, the Taliban, as predicted, immediately took a ton of area. And they are now more popular than ever before. And it looks like they're back in charge. And people are going to say, see, this is why we needed to be there the whole time, blowing up their innocent people, because then the Taliban takes over and the Taliban hates America. And all this is true. The problem is the reason they're so popular is because we were there at all. Okay. And so the sooner we rip this Band-Aid off, is it going to be immediately painful? I'm sure. It's probably going to be painful for an entire generation, because some of those women and children that we killed, their husbands, fathers, parents, brothers, and sisters are still alive. And they want somebody, and frankly deserve somebody, to answer for that crime. Okay. So this is the issue in Afghanistan. I understand that it is worth shooting off fireworks over, even if it is just we've stopped doing as much damage as we were before. Even if we're still going to send an occasional drone in there and send an assassin in there. And I really hope that we don't, but I know government too well then to believe otherwise. Okay. But an end to this war that could have easily gone on for another 4 years. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of saved. And even if things get worse before they get better, that's the start of the healing process. Okay. And we just need to stay the course. It's a start. It's still no good. Joe Biden has done everything in his power to irritate. I mean, my piece of my mind last week, Syria, Iraq, Iran. He pissed off all three of them with a few bombs last week. Okay. I get that. That's bad. But I don't want to take away the credit where credit is due for this. We needed to get out. We're getting out. We should absolutely be grateful for that. If you need to build a bridge with any of your Democrat or Republican friends to say, like, you know what? I am grateful about something that Trump did or that Joe Biden did. This is a pretty good one. Is it perfect? No. As libertarians, we love to complain about everything, but I feel like this is a good one to at least say, hey, you know what? That's a good start. I sense some hesitation on y'all's parts here, but how do you how do you see this?
Well, I see this as Iran in about 1976, 1977. We just left them heavily armed. Mm-hmm. I was just looking here. We left a fleet of Black Hawk helicopters for the Afghani Air Force.
Smart.
Yeah, real smart. You know what we also took with us? All the contractors that keep those things in the air.
Great.
Yeah. And also the thing that we also did, we didn't take them all. We took all the people that we wanted to take that had value, and then the people that have been helping us for the past 20 years. Some of them are getting refarmed to other countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, things like that. So they're getting dumped off into countries they've never lived in before. So, yeah, we're doing this just as the worst way possible. I mean, don't get me wrong. I applaud the idea that we are out of Afghanistan. But the way that we did it, once again, just shows that we are setting ourselves up for failure. You just left a mostly armed Black Hawk helicopters all over, plus other munitions, in a country that's probably on the edge of complete collapse. And we just took off and said, oh, okay, cool, see ya. So, yeah, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be real ugly for the Afghanistan people. I hope it's not. Capitalism would come in, hopefully, and make things better. But, of course, the only thing that Afghanistan is really good at exporting, opium. So we get a little grumpy about that. So, yeah. I think we're going to see what we saw in Iran from 1979 to 1985, probably in the next year or two.
And
that's what they want.
It's like we've all seen this before, right? Serious deja vu. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, right? I feel like I'm in a very, I'm going to be true stereotype libertarian. I'm never happy with anything, even if I get what I want, right? Because I'm like, let's end all the wars and, let's not continue to create more terrorists. We've been screaming that line for 20 years now. We're just creating more terrorists. This is how, and this is why we shouldn't be there. But I've also always been on the side of okay, let's, phase out, make sure we get out what we need to get out, and do it in a way that doesn't hurt the people of Afghanistan or whatever country we're in. This is going to get real ugly. And then put on top of that, right on the heels of a pandemic and health crisis. And now we've apparently got 13 states with a new Zika virus, basically a new mosquito disease. It's highly deadly and it's spreading fast. So we're going to hear about that and all these new variants of COVID and this, and the gas prices are through the roof. And what was the other? Wells Fargo has announced they are suspending personal lines of credit. Do you remember the last time that happened? It was 2008. And everybody lost their homes. And so here we go again. And it's maddening, I guess, because it's like, we've all seen this in our lifetime once. And here we are, the adults in the room now, and the same shit is happening. We're making the same mistakes that they made before us. We never learn.
Do either of you see this as a net positive, pulling out of Afghanistan?
No.
It's positive 30 years from now.
Yes. It is positive 30 years
We're going to be in 2050. Our kids are going to see Afghanistan like we see Iran right now. The big difference is there was a lot more interference in Iran for decades. Well, we've done the same. What am I saying here? But the reality is Iran is starting. I mean, the Iranian people have always never really been a big fan of the Ayatollahs, but they were the ones in power, and it's going to be like that with the Taliban. Iran eventually will fall. It's unnatural for the Persian, even living under the Shah. I fully expect to see Iran as a somewhat democracy in my lifetime.
The cycle
I hope
is coming to an end.
The cycles, it's coming. We're going to see the same thing with Afghanistan in probably about 20, 30 years.
Yeah. So a generation thing I talked about still on the table.
It's my theory has always been that you need to be 2 generations removed from like horror to really get over it. Because when it's your parents, when it's your grandparents that have experienced it, it's not as big of a deal. When it's your parents that experience it, it's kind of a big deal. And when you've experienced it, well, it's probably screwed you up.
Right.
Okay. All right. So give me 2 generations. But would either of you have stayed instead?
I would have left about 15 years ago, and I wouldn't have started the Iraq War, but sure. Those things. And I probably would have just bombed the crap out of things and then found where he was and not thought that it could be a wedding, could be a militia. Hey, why take the risk? Boom. Like our drone guys have been doing for a long time. And some of them are pretty screwed up from it, by the way. We don't think there's something like, it was a wedding, or I wasn't going to do. Yes, there were some screwed up guys that did that, and guys and girls, but there are some that really take that extremely hard when they make that kind of a mistake and pay for it the rest of their lives, along with the people that got blown up.
Sure.
And that's a whole different kind of tying back to mental health. That's a whole different level of PTSD. I had whatever you're dealing with.
No, it is.
Right. I had a friend who was in Vegas, and that was one of his jobs, Nevada. Mm-hmm. And that was his job. And he's like, it hits you slowly because you disconnect yourself because you tell yourself you're playing a video game. But then, like, it hits you that it was real. And then you start questioning your own humanity. Like, how have I come to a point where it is okay for someone to sit in a booth and push a button to kill strangers across the world? Mm-hmm. How is that okay?
Yeah.
And how did I let somebody convince me to do this? Like, it's terrifying.
I legitimately think that we will, in our lifetime, come to see drones and remote delivery systems like that become as unwanted as chemical weapons. And
unless it's an Amazon delivery drone, I am all about those kind.
Yeah, but I legit think that there's going to be a point where we as a society say it is not cool to sit there in orbit at 35,000 feet and take out random targets. that's the thing. I could see an individual type of thing where we've got facial recognition, you nail the person and stuff like that. But of course, I'd still like the person captured, put in a jail cell, tried, and then left in that jail cell if they really are that guilty. But that's just me. Yeah, it's a tough thing. I think we should have been out of Afghanistan 15 years ago. I'm glad we're out so that if my kid ever decides to enlist, he won't be there. But of course, hey, Biden's term's pretty young. He can spin up another war any minute.
Yeah.
The way things have been going, looks like about how we're headed. Way to turn my good news into something bad. But anyway, that's
what I do.
I felt like at least that is something. At least it's something instead of continuing it. If we're going to be 2 generations removed from the end of this, regardless, might as well get it done sooner, I guess. And yeah, should we have not ever been involved? Should we have not done it 15 years ago? Yeah, of course. But there are not too many libertarians in charge of the bombs that drop. I've noticed not a whole heck of a lot of them.
But we get a lot after they've been in the service. We get a lot after they've been in there, and they go, "Wow, this is really screwed up."
I'm a dependent or former dependent, so I get it. We do, and it's all of us that grew up military, joined the military, married into the military, whatever. Like, I think a whole bunch of us come out on the other side going, ew, and you see that truly in, if you look back at like the Army Times, for instance, when they polled military members, Jorgensen and the elections before that, Gary Johnson did very well among military.
Yep.
And like current and former.
Yep. Across the board.
Well, Brian, my ray of sunshine, why don't you give us a piece of your mind?
Oh, I don't know. There was so much popularity on my little thing on intellectual property. I was really hoping I was going to try to get into a little thing about that lady. I hope she patented her idea because I hope she makes a lot of money off foster care and telling how to do things right. Yeah. I thought about that for a while. And I still kind of come back to it. I'm going to still go back to what we talked about last week, which gets on intellectual property. And the one thing I kept coming back to is my ideas are my ideas, my thoughts are my thoughts. If I come up with something, I have the right, I think, to create it. And the one thing I kept thinking about was if I say that thought out loud, all of a sudden we go full socialist and it becomes our thought. Our thought, not my thought, our thought. You let it out of the box, so now it's ours. And I'm going, it's kind of anti-libertarian, It's like, just because I said it out loud and it was a good idea doesn't mean that if I patent it or if I have no way of patenting it, doesn't mean it becomes our idea. So there's a lot of things that people said about it. And don't get me wrong, I think there's ways to fix the existing system. I am not at all a proponent of maintaining the existing system. It's terrible. It's flawed. It's got a lot of problems in it. But I think you can make it better. I think you can go ahead and reform that system. But I keep looking at how... I apologize. You see the cat in the lower corner? He just opened the door.
I've had traffic this whole time. No sweat.
No. The cat opened the door.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
I did hear that.
Yeah. That's
like somebody's coming in, was not expecting the cat.
I was not expecting the cat either, but he knows how to do that. So where was I? Anyhow, I keep coming back to this idea that, we've got to reform the system, but all the current proposed ideas in a voluntary society involve this mishmash of either business contract law or social contract, which again, I brought that up last week. The reading about social contract when someone says that on the libertarian side is usually pretty deafening. So it's one of those things that I think we need to not keep discussing here, but as libertarians have to come up with a better solution. We like the idea of, that not having the government involved, but I have yet, even with a week of people telling me I'm wrong, willing to admit it, but no one's got a better idea. So, unless you really just want to get rid of the whole thing, then that's fine. But it's kind of like it's going to be like China. It's going to be terrible.
Like social credit systems and
more along the lines of just no trust in a product. Because if I can slap the name Colgate on my toothpaste that I made in my back of my house, and I can do a good printer that makes it look like real Colgate, and you use it, and by the way, it's full of glass particles, and I cut your lips open, and it's one of those things that you just sit there and go, there's a lot of bad that comes out of this if we yank the system. It doesn't do a lot of good, but there's a lot of bad that could come out. So, and that's why the system was invented to begin with. It wasn't something that just the government came in and said, aha, we're going to control everything. They realized that this was a bad thing. So,
as usual, don't let a disaster go to waste, and the government's very good at that. Like, is there a problem? Yes. Could the free market have solved it? Maybe, but we got government instead. I get what you're saying, Brian. I really do, and I feel for it, and I feel for the intent. But I have a tough time visualizing government doing anything where the intent of the good people actually shines through. And the problem I have with intellectual property is this, as Sam kind of mentioned last week, it's not technically property.
Our ideas.
Right. But this isn't even our, it's not a thing. Like, it's not a share. Like it's something else entirely. So if I say, and you know what, if this makes me communist, so be it. But are there certain things that are shared? Sure. The planet is shared. It's not my Earth. It's our Earth. I don't even have it. There's no way around that. Earth is Earth. There's one of those, and we're all living on it right now. And until Elon Musk invents some base on the moon, like, there's just certain things that sound like ours.
Everything is finite.
Right.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
As someone who, like, I have done a lot of writing, editing, things like that. Like, on this topic, like, I've always wondered, like, what if I wrote something that to me was genuinely original?
Yeah.
Come to find out, someone had written the exact same thing, thoughts, but even every song and every book, has it been written? Every thought has it, what I'm saying? Like, eventually, like, I think, is thought finite?
Well, we keep thinking that we're at the pinnacle of technological progress, and we keep proving ourselves horribly wrong.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We keep finding new and exciting ways to not only share cat memes and stupid things like that, and write songs about Dookie and all that. But this just keeps going in society. I think that there's not an end to creativity. I think that there's definitely a lot of what's that term I said? A lot of borrowing in creativity. You can classify it as I stand on the shoulders of giants. That's how I can see so far.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that there has to be a way to protect that one way or another. And if you feel that your product is something you want to keep and want to defend, I think you should have the right to do so without someone coming in and creating enemy of my enemy, on the We Are Sort of Libertarians network. They could do it. You'd probably be a little ticked, but legally, if we did, so.
But I think this is a fantastic example. I'm not worried about it because we're the better one. Right? Like, this is like, if somebody invents the concept of baseball and they're like, but nobody else is allowed to play except for these crappy teams, I don't really care that you invented baseball. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so if you say I invented baseball and then a bunch of people jump all over it, and it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry that you're not getting adequately paid. Hopefully somebody would hold you up or want to study your books or invite you. I mean, what happens today? You get invited to do speeches, write your memoirs, talk about your process behind it. Like, I don't have any problem with that. I think it's funny, Brian, that you bring up China, and China to me proves to me the exact opposite of what it proves to you. Because I think I see China and I say, that's what's currently happening with international copyright laws, with international trademark protection. China still does whatever the hell it wants because they own too much of your debt. The rich people don't have to care about it. Amazon's not worried about if you smile. right? Or if they smile. But as soon as you smile or smirk, oh, that's their patent. You're going to get sued, right? So this is just something that benefits these rich people or the people that own debt, or because nobody can do anything about them. And who ends up getting hosed is these little guys. And I know you say, and I understand, Brian, you say you change it. I'm not saying defend everything about the current system, because I understand there are changes that you would make. I just have a tough time seeing, is it a way to make China or Amazon or whoever else care? Right. Like I have a tough time seeing government being like, you know what? You're right. We have too much power over this. Our crony allies have too much power. We need to let a little of this go.
Right. And the thing is, that's what happens with the big entities. Any big entity is going to do that. Right. I do want to correct something, Hodey. I'm sorry.
Hit me.
What percentage of the U.S. debt do you think China holds right now? Give me a ballpark percentage.
I will go with 8%.
You were close. 5.
5? Okay.
Yeah, so that's not domineering. If someone's got 5% of my debt, and we're gonna call in and collect it. Okay, hold on a second. Hang on. Money machine go brrr. Okay, here you go.
There is a balance on some of these things. If you add 5% to your debt, that's one thing, but like the other part is you have to enforce it. So you say, not only are we going to do something about it, or not only can you not do it, China, because, then you call us on our debt, then we also have to go in and enforce it, which is an additional cost, which is additionally making our crony allies mad, in addition to taking on that 5% that got sold.
Yeah, well, here's the other problem with it. China, the yuan is pegged to the dollar.
Yeah.
So if we print more money to pay off their debt that they're collecting on, it devalues the yuan. So
I understand how all these things are
it's like mutually assured economic destruction. So it's beautiful.
I understand this. The thing is like when somebody has more to lose than the other, and in this case, yes, we have guns pointed at each other's heads, but if the guns are pointed at each other's heads, then it should be business as usual. And then why are they not enforcing the copyright laws?
Because this goes back 20 plus years. Chinese cult, and I'm not trying to throw the culture under the bus, but this is what I was taught when I was in Hong Kong, when I was working on my master's, that the Chinese government and Chinese business is in the business of copying, because they didn't have at the time the innovation, the ability to go ahead and innovate. There's a lot of effort that goes into innovation and investment that China didn't have. Now they're trying to create it over there, and they're trying to, with the schools and everything else. And you start seeing scientific papers coming out a lot more from Chinese universities, and some of it's good and some of it's hot garbage. So that it just takes time. But they were very clear to me back in 2007 that their entire economy is to find what you're doing, no matter what it is, copy it, mass produce it, get it out. Doesn't the quality, you really don't care that much, but make as much money as possible and disappear.
Yeah.
And that's what happens a lot of times.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen in a voluntary society where there's no intellectual property? As I said, if I print grandma's hip, go ahead and make a hip and put on Depew on the side of it, except I spell it DEPEW, or something like that. And it gets put in grandma, and all of a sudden 5 years later, grandma's hip fractures because it was made of shitty steel, and you have no idea, this came from Depew, and, there's no recourse, there's no nothing, because that company that really made it is gone.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that fall out from that. And also the investment into development, into those things, it just all disappears if somebody can just walk in, copy it. And I'm not saying forever, but I'm saying at least a little bit of time.
But is there no accountability then in a libertarian society?
It starts getting social contracty kind of,
because there's three requirements. There's 3 requirements of a libertarian society: accountable, transparent, voluntary. That's it.
And that's the thing, is that where's the accountability if I put out 50,000 copies of your product, and it sucks and it has your name on it.
It's not going to be as good as my product. This is why chefs.
But that's what I'm saying, though. I'm saying I'm putting the exact name, exact labeling, everything. I am copying your product so it looks just like yours. I am shipping it in. It's like the couch bags and stuff like that. You know, it's not Coach, it's couch. All those things, all that stuff. Now we bags. Oh, Brian, who gives a shit? No, grandma's pacemaker, grandpa's replacement knee. That computer you have that has a battery that unfortunately spontaneously combusts only 1% of the time, and it says Apple on it. What is your recourse in that type of society? Because I got news for you. There are going to be plenty of people out there who are more than willing to make the dollar store version of it. And with today's printing technology, scan, print, make it look exactly like yours. What's your recourse in that society?
If you make my exact product for cheaper than me, none.
No, but the thing is this: who are they going to come after, though?
Okay,
you.
So I think I'm seeing the disconnect here. Okay, Hodey, what he's saying is, you sell Crest toothpaste.
Okay,
he uses the exact same box, exact same label, exact same everything, except his is liquid cement, which is unidentifiably like it. In paste form, looks the same. He's even added some flavoring to it.
Okay.
But,
pasty cement.
Right? But, half hour later, people's teeth are breaking off from the stuff he sold.
Okay.
But it looks just like yours, right? Remember when, we had the Tylenol thing several years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Someone was putting...
in Chicago. Yeah.
Right. Someone was putting, something else in cyanide. The Tylenol.
It was potassium cyanide was killed 7 people.
Yeah, right. But they didn't know they bought a Tylenol thing off the shelf.
Yep.
And so I guess, right. But I appreciate you clarifying that. That makes more sense. The recourse that I have is that I did not make it. And if we're in a libertarian society where you understand that people can pretend to be me, then you're going to take extra precautions to make sure they're not me or that they are me. Right? That these are the types of things. These are voluntary solutions that come about. When I love pointing to the fall of the feudal era because these are times where we actually have these things. We have these merchant guilds that could slap labels on everything to say, it's all merchant certified. Oh, this is certified silk. This is certified silk. And when some of the silk was actually wool and was actually crap, what happened to those merchants? They got, and I don't mean to, this is not exaggerated, they got literally crucified. Right. And so there actually is an amount of recourse if you piss off people and hurt them. And you find out that's did the silk payer pay the price or the silk makers pay the price? Because everything's oh, you must have sold this fake silk. No, the merchants did. Right. Well,
yeah, but if I think the voluntary society, we're going to get a little grumpy if we're putting up crosses in front of Dollar Tree.
Well, right, fine. This is my crazy thing.
Come on, Thelma, you sold me this. Get up there.
Yep, you sell a knockoff thing. Bring out the crosses. There you go.
Who would want to work there in that case? Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to take the personal risk because.
Well, now it was the merchants who intentionally mislabeled it that got crucified.
But that's what I'm saying is though somewhere in the middle. You know how much fake crap gets into our consumer world.
Oh yeah.
Tons. Now, most of it, thankfully, is just
intellectual property rights aren't working out.
In my industry, that's a big issue.
Yeah.
Because we're buying tattoo inks and the stuff that we buy, we know the company, we know it's vegan this, it's all natural that, whatever. Mm-hmm. But you can go on Amazon and buy literally identical bottle of ink and get it here, and it looks like red ink or blue ink, but people get sick from it. People get hurt from it.
Right. And that's the part that I sit there and go,
am I liable?
And that's the thing, you would be. But in a total voluntary society, that's where it comes down to you have to be able to, everyone's a good guy and you have to be able to trust everyone. We just got done talking about mental illness. Not everyone's a good guy. And there are some people we just can't trust. And if that's it, that 1% that you can't trust is probably enough for us to put safeguards in place one way or another.
I think if the 1% is worried about crucifixion, they might be dissuaded. That's how I feel.
You know how many psychopaths we have that sit there and go, You know what? Yeah, that bus drove over and took 27 school kids. Or wait a minute, that building was it had a building code issue that I should have evacuated the people. But darn it, Margot, I need you to kick in an extra $5,000 so we can reinforce the building. You know,
But if they're not afraid of market kickbacks, what makes you think they're going to be afraid of intellectual property kickbacks?
No, they're not.
afraid of it.
They're not.
Right.
But the thing is, there's enforcements. There's enforcements, and that's the thing, is that you can eventually catch them. Okay, in a totally voluntary society. Well, I got away. What your other thing is?
I mean, that's a job someone will do.
Yeah, but who? I mean, who do we give the authority to get out in front of Dollar Tree and throw Steve up there on the cross in front of the store?
Maybe that's a very it's a job that you're selected for, right? But it doesn't have to be authority over anything.
There might be a lot of back and forth on this one. As far as enforcement goes, I would say there's a book called The Machinery of Freedom by David Friedman. One of my favorite books. It's one of those that kind of helps deal with this. I think the only reason I cite a book isn't to just be like, I cite a book, I win the conversation. I'm aware it's just an opinion, right? Like, I get that. But the thing is, when we talk about enforcement in a libertarian society, it's a long conversation, and probably longer than I would effectively be able to summarize. There are a lot of by market consequences, and I don't even really love the idea of crucifying somebody. In fact, I don't really love the idea of violence at all. My hope would be peace, and market just being like, oh, hey, watch for the bad label, or this is something this is a way that you can tell, or we'd have better ways of being able to tell when this person made this thing. I think maybe more individualism. Maybe you just say, hey, I have a code that only I know, that you can type in here and we share it, whatever it may be. I don't know. I think it's something that the market should be able to explore. Brian, I love that you rep your property, intellectual property. I do. We need somebody with that voice, and I'm glad you're that punching bag. Brian's been at it all week too. He had a healthy serving today. He's going at it tonight.
I have a lot of respect for your arguments, and I understand, even though I think there may be a better way to do it as an anarchist, I do understand where you're coming from and why. I get it. Does that make sense?
Oh no, I am 100% on board with something better. The current system is not the greatest.
Right.
And I don't like leaving the feds in charge of, well, is this a real jersey? I can't tell. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff, but I am talking about the big stuff, the
absolutely
the coming in with the fake products, the fake things that get into our consumer world, and that are protections on that. There are protections for patent infringement, things like that keep the sane ones, the big ones, at bay. You're not going to stop the 1% that want to copy and sell at a flea market. Yeah, trust me, that's insulin. Go ahead and take it. It's good.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're buying your insulin at a flea market, you have a problem anyway.
Right. And I'll even grant this to you, Brian, that I think this is something a lot of libertarians love to pretend that we just remove government and everything is better. When that's not an actual solution. Government is getting in the way of a lot of solutions.
Yeah.
But it's not a solution in and of itself to remove the government. So people want to know what that solution is. And I think maybe it's just as simple as saying culturally we need to respect people's intellectual property more without having a codified set of intellectual property. By being like, hey, we need to have a culture where if you do this, we are going to run you out of town or something, and that's, and there's a lot of libertarianism that relies on a lot of cultural changes. I think we want to get rid of the government, but the government's not going anywhere till the culture changes anyway. Right. And so these are conversations that we need to have about how we would, it would be interesting to have a conversation that we'd have about how we culturally respect people's intellectual property.
Yeah. Right. It sounds, oh, go ahead, Lou.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, this conversation has actually, reminded me of an example of one of these sort of, voluntary enforcement, which is not, what they do isn't enforcement in that sense, but it's like an award. There's this voluntary organization for people who have celiac disease and gluten allergies, things like that. And they will test products and they will award them, that this is gluten-free. This is not through like the government. This isn't part of the FDA thing. None of that. It's a totally private organization with doctors, and they lab test everything. And it's an award that you earn as a gluten-free product that you then can put on your packaging. And people look for that. Even like if it doesn't have that, but says gluten-free, there's a good chance it's not actually gluten-free.
Right.
And we've had to learn to navigate that because I got half my, my husband and half my kids have gluten intolerance or celiac, but they can't. Yeah. And if it doesn't have the little green, the government, that's not the government or the FDA or the whatever. It's a volunteer organization of gastroenterologists and allergists and autoimmune, rheumatologists and things like that have voluntarily said, as this board, we will award this label and prove, and we check that, right? Because if we eat one of your products and he has a bad reaction, like I can go to the medical board.
Right. You can report back to them and say, hey, either your testing sucks or they lied to you because they changed something. Right. And I mean, that gets back to Consumer Reports. It gets back to all these.
Exactly.
But it also gets back to the Better Business Bureau, which was supposed to be that version of Consumer Reports. And when you deal with the Better Business Bureau now, it's like dealing with Yelp. So
it's a little weird now.
Yeah, and it's a little salesy. It's a little clumsy. It's a little, but we'll help you. But darn, that company gave us $5,000 last month. It doesn't seem like something the company would give us $5,000. Like they would do something bad,
right?
So that's a tough one. It certainly gives me something to think about. Maybe instead of arguing against intellectual property in existing at all, because I think Lou said it last week, like, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
But it's like there should still be something that, like, I should still be able to recognize dickish behavior.
Yeah.
And be like, we should do something either culturally or whatever to stop people from or as Lou just said now, incentivize people to be good instead of being dicks. Yeah, I think there's stuff like that. Lou, piece of your mind, and then we will wrap it up.
I think the thing this week that has really bugged me the most would be Richardson getting suspended from the Olympics.
Oh yeah, jeez.
And I'm not even kidding. I went through this the other day. I love the reactions I'm already getting, and I haven't even said anything.
Lock her up. No.
No. So I literally went and clicked, like I typed in, a couple keywords and hit news, and probably 7 out of 10 articles, somebody somewhere is quoted about how, well, marijuana can be a performance enhancing drug. And I died. Okay. I was like, I had, what? Really? Like, okay, even if you're talking a sativa strain, which can have an effect that makes you feel like you are thinking very sharp. You may even have a little energy. Okay. But inhaling any kind of smoking anything when you're a runner does not enhance shit.
Narrative.
What the fuck? Did we forget how lungs work while we were talking about how smoking weed was helping the Olympic runner? They're full of shit. They sound about as dumb as Holcomb on the topic.
Yes.
I'm furious about the whole Sha'Carry Richardson situation. It's always been a thing. You haven't been able to smoke weed. And you really should be able to. Here's the problem. If the Olympics is going to argue that, hey, here's the best of the best, then you can't have rules like this. Otherwise, you can't say you have the best of the best. You can say we have the best of the people that we allowed to compete. And we made some arbitrary rules about who was and wasn't allowed to compete. Everybody takes something, and I think what breaks my heart is Sha'Carry Richardson has handled this so wonderfully. Mm-hmm. She confessed to doing it even recreationally, or actually just to help.
There's nothing to confess.
She was sad. Oh. She was sad, so she took some, and to help her feel better one day. And here it is, and that's what it is. It's not like she's been very clear about it. I am sick for her. She is the fastest woman in the world, and she's only been proving it for the past several years, but we're not going to get to see her in the Olympics. It's ridiculous. It is something that, look, Olympic Square has beer upon vodka that is served up to the athletes. That is they get a platter and they pour it out and they're like, oh, hey, anybody for some vodka shots? Anybody for some? It's a booze fest down there, right? Every book that goes behind the scenes will tell you this. And yet, did you take marijuana? Oh, you monster. You absolute monster. It's this stereotype. It's happened here in America. Of course, it's been true all around the world because we're just kind of realizing it. It needs to stop. It's so stupid. I love sports. I actually really love, for a while, I actually was going to get into women's sports of all things. Even though I know as a dude, it might sound weird, but I love the highlight reels on some of them are amazing. And I feel they get buried under like guy sports top 10s. Whereas when you see a highlight, you see a highlight. And Sha'Carry Richardson is a highlight. She's so fast. And it just bugs me whenever we get robbed of actually seeing that. And I understand maybe wanting to have something to be like, hey, we don't want people taking these harmful substances because we don't want to incentivize self-harm or harmful behavior. But when you're looking at something as Sha'Carry Richardson, or let's take me, I am more likely to die from a Big Mac overdose than I am of a heroin overdose. I am still allowed to go buy Big Macs. I am not allowed to go buy heroin. Okay. And I understand people want to keep me healthy, but where do you draw that line? You ban me from Big Macs, you ban me from soda, you ban me from everything except of a couple of pills, and all of a sudden we're living in a total dystopia. Let athletes take care of themselves how they need to be taken care of. I am very bent out of shape about this one because I think it also affects, she wasn't taking it for pain management personally. But it is one that some athletes have wanted to take for pain management. And because of these stupid laws, they end up taking something much more harmful for pain management. This is something that has affected me and my family in like a kind of personal way. And so it is something that I take really personally when I see something cracking down on like marijuana, because it's something that somebody could be taking it for pain or even sorrow like this. And it's like, well, would you rather she turn to booze because that's legal? Would you rather she turn to overeating because that's legal? Would you... She took marijuana. Get over it. I don't know. That's all I got to say. This one makes my blood boil a little bit.
Right.
I'm just going to quote one quote. Okay. The rules are the rules, and everybody knows the rules going in. President Joe Biden. Now, he also did say whether they should remain the rules is a different issue, but the rules are the rules.
I don't care for your rules, Mr.
The funny thing is this just echoes what Obama said when he was leaving office. The quote was, I can do more for marijuana legalization outside the presidency than in the Oval Office. And I was like, that has got to be the dumbest effing thing I've ever heard in my life.
And he's done so much good work with it, right, Brian, since then?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's still just absolutely ridiculous statement. So I am deeply upset. I wish she would compete. I think it's ridiculous. I don't know how she runs with those nails. I never understood it. But hey, you know what? If it helps, whatever.
Hair.
And the hair. Yeah, exactly. I'm like going, you gotta be like get losing a 100th of a second with that hair going like that. But hey, you know what? If it works for you, that's fine. But yeah, we're at the point now in this country where we've got to start moving a little bit more forward. And once again, the government, the U.S. Olympic Committee has just put their foot in it again. And but there's nothing more to say. You guys really were very eloquent about it. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm glad Lou brought it up. It is something that I think we need to. I mean, just with White House interns earlier this year, right? That wasn't even the rule. In fact, the rule was, Mr. Biden, that they could stay because you said that. But then you kicked them out anyway, and then you said, oh, there really wasn't that many that we kicked out anyway.
It was just a few that we crushed their spirit and dreams and everything because of something they did years ago. Hey, Kamala, what'd you do when you were in college?
Right.
Oh, by the way, and what'd Holcomb do in college too? Yeah.
Yeah. And I look at it too, and I guess from my perspective as a woman, I see it through this lens more maybe, but I see a young Black woman and then I look back and I think of Michael Phelps. Didn't he get all his stuff back? Like they gave him all his medals back and like reinstated all his wins.
Well, I don't think he got him taken away because Phelps never tested positive. He just had a picture that showed him doing it.
Yeah. It's all he had was a picture.
But he didn't get dinged on the test.
It was after the Olympics,
right?
That he got caught. So there was a time where he was, and let's be honest, any of these athletes, for as many calories as they burn, they need anything that will get more food down their gullet. And if smoking a joint helps them with that, so be it. But Phelps never had anything taken away. It was post-Olympics. He was caught in a party smoking, showing with Carrie. I don't know if it was a bong or something, but it was that's a little bit different, but it's still a shitty rule. So
it is like, I feel like when it happened to him, the response was, what's the big deal? But now it's happened to her, and it's kind of 50-50.
Well, who do we know I mean, seriously, other than the people who think that if you've got a gram of something that's illegal, we should take your children away and go over to Dollar Tree and borrow the crosses. That's not a very large number of people anymore. 20, 30 years ago, that's maybe 70%. I think we're getting down to the point where it's 20, 30% of this of the country would maybe have that thought. But honestly, I think the majority of the country is like, this is dumb as hell. So
right. No, I do agree. It's better than it was.
Yeah.
But I
it's
feel
got
like
room.
From the ones that are mad about it, or a lot of them, I'm seeing a lot of just focus on the wrong aspect of it, or kind of comparing how they reacted to Phelps versus how they're reacting to her, and it's like,
I think Phelps at the time was trying to be more of a spokesperson. I think that, and I think he lost his endorsements because of it, but really it doesn't matter because he's Michael Phelps. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we have seen a big change as we keep talking about it in this country in the past 20 years when it comes to drug legalization, which is a good thing. There are problems with it, but more than likely it's going to be a good thing. I think the majority of people think this is a terrible decision by the USOC, and Joe Biden going there and saying, the rules are the rules, whether that they should be the rules is different, but they're still the rules. I think it's falling tone deaf on a lot of people. The one thing I would say is funny, the Fox Newses and all that cut the first sentence and stopped it right there to broadcast, say, oh, look, Joe Biden's tough on drugs. And MSNBC took the second sentence, whether it remains the rules is different, led with that piece of it. So there was some little nuance in how they were delivering the same message.
Not surprising at all.
Yeah. Disappointing, but expected.
Let them run. It's something long overdue. It's something that libertarians, I'm glad we ended on this because it's something libertarians have been right on for forever, even back when it was unpopular. I still remember a time when it's like, oh, if the libertarians would just let go of their end the drug war nonsense, they'd finally be mainstream. And thank goodness we did it, because honestly, you look at the people we're harming. It's funny that, I mean, yeah, Richardson's become the face of kind of this latest person harmed by our stupid and idiotic war on drugs. But I mean, there's been millions of families broken up because of the war on drugs.
I feel bad that she has to be the martyr, I guess, in this situation. Like, she's being sacrificed for there to be a big change addressed in like the Olympics committee, and that starts the culture.
Sure.
And then of course leads to
all that.
Yeah, but who's in charge of the USOC in the end? Who pulls the purse strings? I mean, there's a lot of voluntary dollars that go into it, but in the end, it's the USOC. The government has a lot of pull over that. And in fact, they actually said the USOC was going to say that when it came to women's and men's soccer, which is the other one we can talk about at some other point. I should have actually had that as my point. That Biden was threatening to pull support and funding if they didn't fix the issue. Now, of course, they lost their deal, but so.
Ugh. Get out of sports. Politicians, y'all suck. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate y'all tuning in tonight. I love you very much, and you have an excellent evening.